Hi, welcome to our From the North podcast on one of the most shocking issues of a generation, knife crime. We hear so much about the heartbreak it can cause and how it can destroy a family forever. It used to be mainly in London. Now we're hearing more and more about it in Manchester and Liverpool and places like Blackpool and Preston. The number of cases involving knives has nearly doubled in the northwest in 4 years. So why does anyone carry a knife in the first place? And what can we do to stop more and more deaths? We're joined by Rob Jackson, who is an emergency nurse with incredible success in getting kids to ditch their knives. We'll hear more about that in a minute. We're also joined by Merseyside Police Deputy Chief Constable Serena Kennedy. But let's start with Louis Bamber. Why did you get involved in the Live Your Life, Drop the Knife campaign?
I mean, for me, really, I was sat at home and it just popped up on Facebook, and then I got a couple of messages, and a young lad that we'd watched grow up had been murdered at an 18th birthday party, and I don't know, there was just this sense of shock, and to watch someone who you'd known for over 10 years grow up and then tragically have their life taken away from them.
What was he like?
He was just, he was such a fun, bubbly person. He would, he wasn't, what you'd think a knife crime victim would be. He was a lovely lad. He had the whole world ahead of him. He'd lost his dad 2 years before, and he'd really stepped into the shoes of being the man of the house. Like he really supported his mum and his brothers and sisters, and he just made everybody smile and laugh. There was never a dull moment when you were around him. When you go round to Jane's, his mum, you can just feel that airy sound, and it's just like you're looking to fill that void, because there's no laughter, there's no he's just I don't know, you just can't explain the feeling of when you're looking and you're watching a family who's lost someone they love so much, just try and cling on to the last memory of him, and it really shocked our town to its core. There's no word to explain it. The whole town just stood still. There was an airy feeling.
And Louis, up until that moment, were you really aware of knives being carried around you?
I mean, no. I mean, I live in Runcorn, and it's a population of 70,000 people, and that was the first time it had ever happened. And I think that's what spurred myself and my business partner Vicky to get up and do something about it, because we don't want any more kids to become victim of this. Life's too short as it is anyway. We need to make sure that these kids have got the opportunities to flourish and find their place in society.
Now, Rob, you often see people coming into hospital in a terrible state, and you're trying to get the message across to people, young people in particular, how bad that can be. Give us an illustration of that.
So we've been doing work around the schools in Merseyside and beyond for over 12 years. We've spoken to over 120,000 young people, and we go out and show young people the reality of what it would be like if you're involved in a knife attack. We show people from the age of 12 really hands hanging off for 70, £80 worth of cannabis bills. We see people that have been stabbed who end up with stoma bags. We see horrific facial injuries, and the impact we have 200-300 kids in a school assembly. It will potentially have people walking out, people passing out, people vomiting. But the thing that really hits home for people is when we actually say to these young people that actually the blood and guts is quite easy. It's quite straightforward. With our training, we know if you've been stabbed in a certain place, what we need to do as a team to sort you out. The hardest part is when one or two of us will walk through and speak to your family and tell them that their son or their daughter's not coming home again.
Tell me what that is like for you.
It's undoubtedly the hardest part of our job. And as I say, with our training, we're very well trained. So if you come in, with respect to you've been stabbed in the liver, we will know within probably 2 or 3 minutes what we need to do to save your life, how to get you quickly onto a CT scanner, to get you into an operating theatre. We can predict realistically physiologically how your body will react depending on where your injuries are, but we can never predict how somebody's family will react when we go through and tell them the person they love is never coming home. And in the people that I work with, we've been spat at, we've been kicked, we've been punched, we've been bitten, because that's how emotion is, and you can never predict how one person's family will react versus another. And that's by far the hardest part of our job, is when we go through and break that news to young people's families that somebody's never coming home again.
Have you got a particular case that stands out in your memory?
Yeah, sadly too many. I won't name names, but no. I remember going through to a gentleman and telling him that his 17-year-old son had been stabbed, only stabbed once, and had died as a result of his injuries. And he literally just stared at me And he stared at me and he said nothing for about 30, 40 seconds. It was the most powerful 40 seconds of absolute silence. And then he ran. He ran outside and we had to get the police to bring him back because he could not take on board the news. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he didn't punch me. He just absolutely just fixed me with his eyes and stared at me. Couldn't take on board what news we'd given him.
And do you ever see young people in hospital who have actually been carrying the knives?
Yeah, of course. There's evidence that 50% of people approximately that carry a weapon will be injured with their own weapon. That's another piece of work that we're doing with the schools. We're educating young people. Actually, if you're involved in quite low-level drug use of, running around with cannabis and cocaine, hanging around in a gang, then people are likely to have a weapon. And quite a number of the injuries that we see have been caused by people who've had knives on them, supposedly for their own protection, and then that knife is then being used against them with pretty devastating consequences often.
How can we stop them doing that?
Education. We need to continue to educate. We need to educate younger. To me, knife crime, with respect to Serena, it's not a police problem. It becomes a police problem when that crime's been committed. It's down to us as health, as partners with different communities, but as parents to go and educate our young people that this isn't right. And actually, when it comes to the attention of our friends in Merseyside Police, that's too late.
Serena, as Deputy Chief Constable for Merseyside, do you think that the police really have been expected to do too much, really, to solve knife crime?
Well, I think, as Rob said, when the police get involved, it probably means that it's too late. And what we've recognised for a long time is we can't arrest our way out of this problem. What we need to do, as Louis and Rob have said, is we need to get involved much sooner. And we have been doing that in partnership. We've got some great partnerships with all of the key stakeholders right across Merseyside. But what we're doing at the moment is we've established the Merseyside Violence Reduction Unit.
How does that work?
So it's basically bringing together all of the key partners, so health, education, local authorities, probation, anybody that is going to be involved in our community's lives. Because what we know is there are indicators in people's lives that they are at risk of either becoming a victim of knife crime or becoming an offender, i.e. carrying a knife. So things like worklessness, if there's domestic abuse in the family, if there's absenteeism from school. So we know them as adverse childhood experiences. So there are indicators in young people's lives, in parents' lives, that we know there's the potential that they may get involved in either carrying a knife or becoming a victim of crime. Now, what we need to do is we need to get involved in those children's and those young people's lives much earlier, as Rob said.
So how young are you talking?
So we are involved with education at all levels right across Merseyside. So we are involved in the junior schools because we need to speak to those children before they consider carrying a knife, before they become a victim of knife crime, because by the time they're doing that, it's too late. So we're working really closely with health, education, local authorities, key charities, all of our key stakeholders coming together, sharing information, because what we know from working with health is health quite often have different information to us. So by working together and getting all of that information, we were able to start educating sooner. So it's getting involved and educating the children at that age. Then if we start to find out about young people who are carrying knives or getting involved in criminality, again, what can we do to divert them out of it? So again, it's working with sports groups, etc., to try and move people away and give them different role models and ambitions.
It's interesting, because I know that you've brought in footballers, for example, to try and get the message across, presumably on the basis that kids will listen to footballers more than they'll listen to police officers.
Exactly. If I turn up to talk to young people, I'm wearing a uniform like this, they don't particularly relate to me. In Merseyside, we've got some great role models as footballers, and other athletes that we've had. Katerina came and spoke to us before the People's Awards, the British sports personality, and she did some work with us at a football match. Those people are the people that can really help us, because our young people relate to them. They can help us change the ambition and what young people on Merseyside are thinking about, and challenge their beliefs.
What's the youngest case that you've heard of where a child has carried a knife?
Well, we hear about it in primary school.
So how young are you talking?
I think the youngest I was told of was an 8-9-year-old that had gone into school with a weapon. I think it's also very important to remember, Lucy, that actually 95% of people aren't involved in this. And while these programmes that we're going out doing are important that we deliver it, you know, and I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40. I had stranger danger, don't play on the railway when I was at school, but these are the issues in our communities. And we're not naive. We know that this education, it's not going to get rid of knife crime, but it will help reduce it because it will change attitudes and change education. But it's important to remember that 95% of people in Merseyside and across our country are not carrying knives and not involved in this sort of behaviour.
But then suddenly it affects your life like it did with you, Louis. I mean, you would have thought that it would never happen to one of your mates.
No, I mean, to be sat in bed, you know, and for it to just happen, and then for the, you know, for the past 2 years, this is what I've dedicated my life to, is changing the, you know, the aspirations of young people, changing attitudes to make our streets safer, but not just for our young people, for everybody to come together as a community to, you know, to rejoice what once was, you know, where everybody could go out and be safe. You know, it just doesn't happen these days, and that's really where we need to get to, through the education, through the partnerships. You know, that I can't fix this by myself, the police can't fix it, and Rob can't fix it, but by working and bringing everybody together, that's how we're going to solve this issue.
The worry is that education takes time, and in the meantime, what happens? In
the meantime, you know, we do the police's prevent it, and, you know, by putting on diversionary activities. We've got Everton Football Club who plays a brilliant part in you know, in helping reduce violence in Merseyside, but stems further away from Merseyside as well, where they work with us in Holton, and it is all about getting, you know, the right support and the right activities for these people that, you know, that are affected right now.
I mean, just to balance that up, I think Robbie Fowler made a film for you as well.
Yeah, I am smiling because we do work really closely with all three great football clubs.
Yeah, Tranmere as well.
Yeah, you know, Tranmere are working with us as well. So there is a big shout out for all the support that we do with our three football clubs. But I suppose we as the police, we've definitely got a role around enforcement. So while I said earlier we can't arrest ourselves, we can't arrest a way out of our problem, we absolutely do have a role in terms of that really high profile presence, making sure that we're using our stop search legislation.
See, that in itself is quite controversial as well. Do you get fed up with that when people say that they're worried about you increasing that? Because presumably if you haven't got anything to hide, then what is the issue?
I have to say we are really lucky that the majority of the people in Merseyside are really supportive of our stop search. So there's been changes to one part of our stop search legislation, which is called Section 60, so we can go into an area when you know, when the serious violence having taken place. And it's really important for us to get feedback from our communities. So we've been doing surveys in our communities and asking their views about when we are out doing stop search.
The old community bobbies used to help though, didn't they?
But overwhelmingly, the feedback is really positive, and we have not moved away from the old community bobby in Merseyside. You know, despite all the talk of austerity, we've laboured really heavily around community policing because it is the community that is going to solve this problem, working together, which is why we've still got our local neighbourhood offices, because we need that relationship with our communities and with our partners. You know, and the public health approach that we're taking now through the Violence Reduction Unit is methodology that we've taken from Glasgow. It's worked very successfully in Glasgow, but it's taken 10 years. You know, so we're year one into what is going to be a long journey. So we need to educate and have the hard edge approach.
10 years, that's a long time, isn't it? Can we speed this process up?
Well, you know, we're taking the learning from Glasgow, so, you know, we've been able to kind of hit the ground running by forming the Merseyside Violence Reduction Unit, because we've got some best practice that we've picked up from Glasgow and other cities. We're working really closely now with some of the other key cities to make sure that we can speed it up.
I was hearing that more and more girls are involved in this as well. Have you seen any evidence of that?
So I've seen very few girls coming in with knife injuries, but anecdotally we are hearing that young girls potentially are the ones that will carry a knife.
Or they're asked to carry a knife for someone else sometimes.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so that's a worrying development.
And again, it's so we've launched. We're launching a navigators programme. So we've got dedicated youth workers working in in the A&E departments to get exactly to do that, to get that intelligence that people will not share with me when I rock up in this uniform, but they will share with a youth worker working in A&E, and it's through those youth workers that we get information like that there are young people, young girls carrying knives, and then we can do something about it.
Rob, what do people say to you about why they carry a knife in the first place?
Lots of different reasons. Some people say that they feel afraid. Some people say they do it because it makes them feel strong. But to be honest, most of them don't actually tell me that. I literally drop in, I'll do my presentation, I'll speak to them for 45 minutes, and then I'll probably go. And I think, unlike Serena, my uniform is probably treated slightly differently, because I'll turn up in scrubs and it appears that I've come from doing this heroic job. I'm the lucky guy that gets to go out and do the teaching. The heroes are there 24 hours a day. I'm work as an amazing team. I think the most important word I've heard, though, in the last 10-15 minutes is the word community. When I started doing this knife crime teaching, to be honest, as far as I was concerned, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was in my boss's office and somebody rang, said, can we have somebody from health go and speak to young offenders? And I was like, well, it's not my job. And I got given this job, and then since then this has rolled out, and we've developed these partnerships with police, with local authorities, and we should be very proud of what we're doing in Merseyside. Merseyside is an amazing place to live. There are some massive areas of deprivation. It's not impossible to, so you cannot ignore that, the area of deprivation, and we need to instill communities. I grew up with God knows how many aunties and uncles that are still aunties and uncles that were no blood relatives, and we need to instill those sort of values from the home, from parents, from communities, so that they never need to come into contact with myself, with Serena or Louis at any point in their lives.
Is that on the basis that they will know where their kids are? They'll know if they're carrying a knife?
They'll know values.
Yeah,
they'll
so
know
a kid won't carry a knife in the first place?
It wouldn't occur to them. It wouldn't occur to them, as I said, I'm closer to 50 than 40. It would never have occurred to any of my generation to have carried a knife. We had values instilled in us through playing football, being involved in boys' brigades or choirs, that we didn't even realise were being instilled in us until I became in my 40s. That's why I had to be there on time, because if I wasn't there on time, I wasn't allowed to take part. That's how it was.
Louis, you're the youngest of us here.
By far.
By quite a way, I think. So you're kind of more in touch, really, with what goes on, I suppose, on the street. Why do you think guys carry knives?
I think there's a little bit of fear or fashion at the moment. There's music has a lot to play for it. YouTube, or your drill music, your fancy films. There are a lot of aspects to why someone would carry a knife. But I'm 24, and 10 years ago I didn't carry a knife. I don't understand where we've come in 10 years, what we've broke in the last 10 years. That's going to take us 10 years to fix. Back when I was 14, if you wanted to have a fight with someone, you'd go and do it on a field rather than hurting yourself on the concrete.
But your work's brought you into contact with kids who do carry
Well,
knives.
absolutely, and I think what Rob has said, it's values, it's having that moral to sit in society. We're seeing a generation potentially of kids having kids with no role models, because there's been problems and incidents well before now that have just stemmed down through generation and generation, and we're seeing the brunt of it now.
So the guys that you've worked with, though, who did carry knives, why did they say that they carried them?
It was merely out of fear. They believed that other people were carrying them in our local area.
And does that wash with you?
Well, it doesn't, no, because you've still got no excuse. You've still got the option to walk away, run away. There's still that option. There's always an option. You're not a coward if you run away, but
And what's made those guys put down their knives now? The
biggest contributor of the two lads that we work with was the death of Eddie O'Rourke in September 2017. No, 18, sorry. That was the biggest contributor. It rocked our town. You had thousands of young people mourning his death, at the place where it happened, and I think it really, the penny dropped for them. And I'd like to say that we've seen nearly a third of reduction in knife crime since that incident, and I'd like to think that these young people are making a better decision now, and they realise what trauma it can actually bring to a community and a family.
But you don't want it to take a death to bring that message home, do you?
No, but I think with the way society is today, that does kickstart it. But I think there's a lot of people that don't really know what's going on, because everyone's got their own issue, and I think that's the biggest problem, is that there's so many issues within our society that they're all contributing to each other, and nobody's got time to help fix another issue when they've got something of their own to deal with. And that's really the biggest one, is people need to come together to help fix multiple issues, because that's what knife crime really is. It's mental health, austerity, you've got the police cuts, you've got youth service cuts, you've got school cuts, and that's the people who used to play the biggest part. When I was growing up, we had our local Bobby, it doesn't exist anymore, and we've got our PCSOs, and they play a vital part in that. And it's just about building them relationships back up with the likes of youth workers, your PCSOs, and instilling them values again.
So I suppose everyone agrees that we need to bring all of the agencies back together and work collectively. Thank you so much to all of you, and I hope that it's been of some use. It's been really interesting to hear all of your views. Thank you very much for joining us. That is it for this episode from the North. If you'd like more information or advice on knife crime, there are some links in the information pack. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.